So I have a peanut allergy, and everybody always asks me when I tell them that, what happens when you have a reaction? Well, the other night I did have a reaction, and I had the presence of mind to film it.
This is about 4 hours after exposure to what I think was a crispy crunch bar embedded in a cake. The first couple hours I had stomach pains, and now I'm kind of moving into the physical stuff.
This was half hour after last time. And I'm very swollen on the face. Having trouble breathing. And I'm itchy all over.
Histamines are particularly found in the skin and the lungs, contained within mast cells that release histamines upon an allergen reacting with immunoglobulin antibody, what is connected on the mast cell. The presence of histamines cause common symptoms of allergic reaction, such as inflammation in the body and possibly a runny nose.
Antihistamines are needed because symptoms such as asthma, hives, food allergies, and skin disorders are caused by the release of histamines. As you can see in the images on the right and down below, this is what some of these reactions look like in the skin.
Alright, let's look at these hives.
This is my hive, and this is my
Let me see your
feet. Take a picture.
Okay, can you put your arms up for me?
Take a picture.
I'll take a picture. I want to get your back, too.
You can't get my back.
Surprisingly, 60 to 90% of people with asthma have allergic asthma. As mentioned, this is due to histamine restricting the flow in the lungs and airways, also causing mucus to form.
As you can see in the picture, normal lung and airways are very open, allowing the air to flow normally like it should. On the opposite side, the inflamed lung and airway is very thick and swollen, with a lot of mucus, causing the air to have a restriction and not flow as easy.
Histamine is a chemical that naturally occurs in the body. Histamine is derived from the decarboxylation of the amino acid histidine, which is also a Zwitter ion. Histamine is formed by the loss of carbon dioxide. Histidine decarboxylation is facilitated by the enzyme histidine decarboxylase. The reaction involves the formation of a Schiff base followed by decarboxylation and Schiff base hydrolysis.
Although once histamine is produced, it is either quickly deactivated or quickly stored in the mast cells that are found in our tissues.
When an allergen enters our body, we produce antibodies from white blood cells known as IgEs, which attach to mast cells. Shown below, once an allergen enters our body, it connects with the IgE immunoglobulin, which are antibodies produced from the immune system. After the body identifies there is a foreign species, it releases the histamines.
The histamines then respond by reacting with histamine receptors, which are proteins located throughout the body.
H1 receptors are responsible for runny noses, sneezing, tightened airways, hives, and blood vessel expansion, which explains why allergic reactions appear red due to the increased blood in the area.
Allergens come in a large range of sources. Dust mite excretion, pollen, pet dander, and seasonal allergies can trigger histamine release. Some foods also can cause histamine release, such as peanuts, nuts, seafood, and shellfish. Insect stings, certain metals, and certain drugs such as penicillin are also responsible for allergens that release histamines.
An allergy occurs when the body reacts to substances it views as harmful. The substances, such as tree pollen or dust mites, are called allergens. Following the body's first exposure to an allergen, white blood cells produce antibodies that prepare the immune system for the next encounter with the same allergen. Antibodies attach themselves to mast cells, special cells found in the tissues of the respiratory and digestive systems. Subsequent exposure to even a small amount of the allergen triggers the mast cells to release histamine. When histamine is released, it attaches to the receptors of nearby cells. these receptors interact with other substances in the body and cause nearby blood vessels to swell and secrete excess fluid, causing symptoms such as sneezing, runny nose, and watery eyes. Antihistamines are drugs that can protect cells from some of the allergic effects caused by histamine. By attaching themselves to the receptors, these drugs can prevent cell receptors from binding to histamine. This prevents histamine from causing the chemical reactions in the cells that produce allergy symptoms.
This page describes the 4 different types of H receptors in the body. So far, we have already discussed the H1 receptor, which is responsible for the acute allergic responses such as a runny nose, tightened airways, itchiness, and red puffy skin. The H2 receptor produces common symptoms of excessive stomach acid, and as a result, you get bloating, belching, flatulence, and/or heartburn. They're often a precursor to acid reflux and occur at the same time. The H3 receptor, it slows down neurotransmission, and the H4 receptor affects how white blood cells find damage in the body, which is a process known as chemotaxis. The H3 and H4 receptor are still being studied, and there is not much information on them. Contrary to belief, antihistamines do not react with the histamines to prevent allergic reactions. Instead, the antihistamines react with the H1 or H2, 3, or 4 receptors where the histamine normally would, therefore preventing the allergic reaction. This is shown on the next slide.
Like histamine, antihistamines have an affinity for the H1, H2, H3, and so on receptors, and once introduced, they will flood the active site of those receptors, therefore kind of deactivating it, not making it available to the histamine.
Diphenhydramine Benadryl is a commonly known inexpensive antihistamine. It is synthesized through an SN2 reaction that involves base-catalyzed alkoxide ions with an alkyl halide to form an ether, also known as Williamson ether synthesis.
In this reaction scheme, the base, which is the K2CO3, comes and deprotonates, as the picture shows. When that's deprotonated, it turns into a nucleophile. This nucleophile then attacks the carbon, which the arrow points to. Upon this, the bond that is connected to the BR takes those electrons and leaves, thus giving you the product on the right side of the screen.
Antihistamines have gone through 2 major generations. Benadryl is an example of a first-generation antihistamine. Side effects of first-generation antihistamines include dry mouth, sedation functions, and low receptor selectivity among H1 receptors.
Second-generation antihistamines include cetrizine, which is commonly known as Zyrtec. Cetrizine has no side effects that were listed in the first-generation antihistamines and have a higher H1 receptor selectivity. Cetrizine has a more complicated synthesis as well.
So in this mechanism, compound 12 is protonated by NABH4, which is done in a solvent that is a mixture of toluene and water. Upon this protonation, you get compound 13. Compound 13 reacts with SOCl2 with toluene as a solvent. In class, we learned that when an alcohol reacts with this, the hydroxy group gets replaced by the chlorine, giving us compound 10. Compound 10 is then reacted with compound 11 in a nucleophilic substitution. After this process, we will get compound 5 with HCl as the byproduct. Compound 5 is then reacted with compound 14, and in the reaction, sodium ethoxide deprotonates the alcohol, which is on compound 5. 14 is used in an alkylation reaction, and its chain adds to give 15. From compound 15 to compound 1, which is the cetrizine, it happens through an alkaline hydration where water adds and an H hops, creating an amine which wants to leave, which does, giving us the cetrizine. So to recap, antihistamines work by blocking the H receptor thus preventing the actual histamine from entering. Antihistamines are extremely important compounds in many people's lives because it can relieve people of seasonal allergies, mild cases of food allergies, and any other allergen mentioned in our presentation.